Good morning, everyone. For those who do not know me, my name is Ron Levine from Mindfulness and Blue Jeans, and I have been practicing mindfulness and insight meditation for almost 25 years. And I started during a time when I was dealing with clinical anxiety and depression and a raging panic disorder that had blown up into agoraphobia. So I was on disability from work, I was unable to leave the house, and happened to get paired up with a psychologist who even back in the late 90s was already several decades deep into practicing and teaching mindfulness and insight meditation. And this is what he offered me as a way of working with the issues I was going through. And I thought it was stupid. I'm like, what the hell is this guy talking about? I need some help here. Not just like looking at the breathing, whatever the hell he's talking about here, right? But I gave it a shot anyway. And well, geez, here I am. Quarter of a century later, still practicing, teaching. So it's worked out pretty well so far. So I'm gonna keep going a little while longer, I think. So that's what brings me here, and thank you for being with me. This is the next in our ongoing series of calming anxiety by living mindfully. The last couple of weeks, I offered some techniques that I had not actually shared before in a session. Hadn't actually taught them before. And today will be like that again. Today will be another one that perhaps it will be new for you, and it'll be the first time that I've shared it with others. It's something that I myself just kind of stumbled across recently in my practice and was like, oh, that's an interesting angle. And you will be the first folks that I share it with today. So, thank you for being here. Why don't we jump in? As always, let's begin by imagining that we are suspended from the ceiling by a piece of string attached to the top of our heads, as a nice cue to sit up straight, without adding any extra tension to do so. As always, if there is some tension here, that's allowed. Our options are to notice the tension, or try to fight with the tension to get it to leave. And fighting with the tension means we're just bringing more tension to the tension, which is a horrible way to relax in my experience. So if we're experiencing any tension, that's fine. It's allowed to be here. It's allowed to leave in its own time, which may or may not be today. And let's also take a moment to notice what is beneath us, what is holding us up. A chair, a floor, a cushion. Something is supporting us. And we can take a moment to notice that sensation, that contact with the support. And we can notice this gentle lift from that suspension, from the string, from the ceiling at the top. And we can notice whatever is in between the two. For us, right now. However it is. And if you haven't already, you may begin to bring your attention to your breathing. You may notice that your breathing changes as you bring attention to it. Sometimes we think we need to have a certain kind of breathing for our meditation. Sometimes we simply notice that it's very hard to bring attention to the breathing without starting to control and shape it somehow. Now we can control the breathing. There are some kinds of meditation where we deliberately do so. We don't have to do that here. In my practice, I usually just observe the breathing as it is. The same way we can observe whatever tension might be here as it is, or whatever lack of tension might be here as it is. What do things do when we don't try to change them? Try to make them be a certain way? What if we just notice them the way they are? What do they do? Now, I mentioned earlier about this string that's suspending us from the ceiling. And also this support beneath us. And how we can feel the sensation, the contact with whatever is supporting us. That chair, that cushion, the floor. And sometimes, even though it's not really there, I almost feel like I can feel the sensation of that string from the ceiling that's attached to my head, that's suspending me. Of course, it's not really there, but that mental image, it's almost like something I can feel. So sometimes we can, in a way, feel things that aren't actually there. But what's really interesting, I think, is the opposite. The things that are there, that we never actually feel. Now, it's very common in these kinds of practices to go through body scans, where we bring attention to various parts of the body, the arms, the legs, and so forth. But I'd like to offer a little twist on that. Anchoring on the breathing, and keeping that our central focus, can we also expand our awareness out to a part of the body that we don't normally notice? I often like to start with the back of my neck. Now, if you're experiencing some neck pain, you may be very aware of the back of your neck. That may not be the place where you want to start. The idea here is to bring attention to a body part we don't usually notice. Perhaps like the back of the neck, one we don't ever actually see. We can't see the back of our neck, right? Not directly. Now, if the back of your neck is an area that is drawing your attention because of some kind of stiffness or pain, you can pick another spot. Pick, I don't know, your right elbow. Maybe the tip of an ear. Maybe your right ankle bone. Some part of the body that does not normally come into your sphere of awareness. See if you can breathe. Again, the central focus is staying with the breathing, but open the sphere of awareness to this particular body part that normally doesn't draw attention, and see if you can feel it. And you don't have to grit your teeth and have a white-knuckled grip trying to feel it. Maybe you can't feel it. That's fine too. We're just seeing what happens when we anchor on the breathing and bring our attention someplace where we do not usually do so. We simply want to see what that experience is like. Remember that staying anchored on the breathing is the primary focus. Opening up to this body part, whatever it is secondary. So you may opt to focus exclusively on the breathing for a few breaths and then reach out to that body part. And then come back just to the breathing. And then start to notice that body part again. If that's too much and you'd rather just stay exclusively with the breathing, do that. If for some reason the breathing is a problem and you want to stay exclusively with the body part, try that. I wouldn't recommend that as the first option, but if that is what works better for you at this time, try it. You may opt to try another body part. Perhaps because the one you've been working with you find you're now able to feel quite acutely, or maybe you're unable to feel it at all. You want to try another one. Or you can just stay with the one you're with. Just remember, the breathing is primary. as you go through your day, you may keep this technique in mind. When things come up, internally, externally. Or perhaps when not much seems to be coming up internally or externally. There's always this opportunity to come to the breathing and direct our attention, our focus, to one particular area that maybe we don't normally notice. Just to see what happens when we do so. This is a practice of experimentation and inquiry. So even something this basic, this simple, not easy, but simple, when done with consistency, some persistence, some ardency, even just this can be one of the biggest building blocks on our path. Thank you, everyone. I'll hang on for a few moments if anyone would like to share any questions or observations in the chat. Marcy, vital to surround ourselves with inspiring, intellectual, stimulating, beautiful people and the best team of support mentally and physically. Well, I can't say it much better than that. Can't say it much better than that. Yeah. Those of you familiar with Buddhism may know about the triple gem. The Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, with the Sangha being the community. And the Buddha placed the utmost importance on the Sangha, on the community. Not only are we able to, as you say, support each other, but as I mentioned, this is a practice of experimentation and inquiry. And very often, others will ask us questions that we never would have thought to ask ourselves. As my first teacher says sometimes, I can't see behind my head and you can't see behind yours. But we can each see behind the others, right? So we all have our blind spots. And it's through community, through this sharing, this shared inquiry, that we're able to help each other. So, yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that sentiment. Hey, Ren. Yeah, interesting. I felt a slight pain in every part of the body I tried to focus on. And that's an interesting thing. Perhaps a pain that we hadn't noticed before. It's interesting how much stuff is going on at any given time that we aren't aware of. I remember my first teacher a psychologist who got me started, said he was talking to someone new at the practice at one point and said, all right, well, when you're sitting, what's going on? And this person said, well, nothing's happening. And my teacher said, nothing. Nothing's happening. Really? We've got these brains that have billions of neurons firing at every moment. We've got these bodies that have countless processes, some of which are within our control, some of which are completely beyond our control, all happening, keeping us alive. So many sensations coming at us in every second that our subconscious mind has to filter through them and just present to our conscious mind a subset of them that it thinks might be important, usually for survival. So much going on at every moment that we couldn't possibly take it all in. And yet there's that feeling when we're sitting, oh, nothing's happening. Oh, really? Let's look again. All right. So that's an interesting thing that you noticed. There's sensation that perhaps we never realized was even there. And that's what we're here to see and catch what we're not catching. That's why we engage in this experimentation and inquiry. We're not looking for something per se. I like to say this is a practice of seeing, not looking. So we're not looking for something. We're seeing what we haven't been catching. Or perhaps we're seeing something we have been catching, but more clearly. Because again, we're not just experiencing sensations passively. We're perceiving them. And then we're interpreting our perceptions based on our past experience, based on our current desires, based on our current fears. So again, all this processing that's happening, some automatically, some completely by choice, some happening by choice, but it feels automatic because it's so habitual. And that in itself is something we want to see. Oh, here's this thing that's happening on autopilot. Is it actually automatic, or is it a habit that I've had a big hand in over the years and now it just feels automatic? And how's it working out for me? Is this increasing suffering or decreasing suffering? Right? That's all the Buddha taught, was how do we decrease our own suffering. That's why we're doing this. We don't practice clear seeing for the sake of clear seeing. We practice clear seeing for the sake of, oh, here's where I'm getting in my own way, causing my own suffering. Let's maybe not do that. Let's try something else. That's that experimentation. Again, inquiry, experimentation. What's going on? What's really here? What's my role in it? How am I handling it? How's it working out? What should I try next based on the answers to those questions? And then we see how that's working out. And we just repeat the process. It's cause and effect. Karma. This is karma. This is how we work with our karma. It's just that simple. Not easy. Not easy. But it is simple. And part of what's not easy is keeping it that simple. Yeah, Ren, again, when I sit trying to focus on my breath in silence, my mind goes like a 5-year-old child, bombarding me with thoughts like, let's do something actually. This is one I hear a lot. Many times, both from people who are new to the practice and people who have been practicing for maybe a long time, will say, the problem I have with sitting is that when I start sitting, I start thinking of all these things that I need to do or things that I could be getting done. I could be more productive right now. Like I got to clean the bathroom or what have you, right? I could be more productive. I could be doing something more productive. And my answer is usually, I don't know if there's anything more productive than sitting and noticing the fact that we can't sit for 5 or 10 minutes without our mind badgering us so strongly about doing something else. I mean, if we can't sit for a few minutes with ourselves without that coming up so quickly and with such urgency, that's a big red flag, isn't it? I mean, that is one of the things we came to see. We want to see that. If that's happening, that's something to check out. Geez, I can't sit for a few minutes without my mind saying, oh, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do this. Well, geez, if that's what we're noticing almost as soon as we sit down, what does that mean? Well, that means it's probably happening all the time. Probably happening all the time. And is that a suffering way to live or a not suffering way to live? Right? Bathroom's probably going to get cleaned anyway. But how much misery are we putting ourselves through in the act of getting it taken care of? Bathroom's going to get cleaned whether we worry about it getting cleaned or not. The worry is not necessary. It's an add-on. It's a suffering add-on. So, in the long run, I don't think there's anything more productive, say, than noticing the signals that we receive, that we entertain, that we perhaps blindly act upon when we just sit for a few minutes. It's like, wow, look at this. How's this working out for me? Is this pleasant? Because, I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm a high-strung type A personality. I may or may not seem like it on here. It's certainly something that I have improved over the years with my practice. I'm not the way I was 20, 25 years ago, or 15 years ago, even 10 years ago, 5 years ago. You know, again, that persistent, consistent, we work with it. I'm still a little more high-strung in type A than I think I'd perhaps like to be. But that's okay. I'm still working with it. And part of that working with it is just sitting and noticing, wow, look at this. Look at this sense of urgency that really isn't necessary. And where's it coming from? Well, again, we're talking about cause and effect and karma here. And how things seem automatic, but are actually habitual. And that's where a lot of it comes from. At some point, and I can trace this back, I'm fairly certain where this started. I won't get into it here, but I can trace back to where this kind of urgency started to come up for me earlier in life. And what did I do? Well, in order to try to ease the sense of urgency, I would immediately go and try and get whatever the thing was that I felt like I had to get done. Which in itself is not bad. It's not bad, but couldn't I have still gotten it done without feeling so much urgency, so much pressure, like there was this emergency about it that really didn't exist? But I treated everything like an emergency. And that became my go-to habit. And what was really tricky about it, of course, was that I did get lots of things done. And I made this mental connection between this feeling of urgency and getting things done. So it seemed like it was working well for me. Oh, look, I feel this urgency. It's uncomfortable, but then I go get all the things done. And, But the thing is, even after I get all the things done, I've so habituated to this feeling of urgency that I still have this feeling of urgency even when there's nothing to actually do. This is a classic example of how we cause our own suffering. And so what do we do then? Do we say, oh, well, I guess I don't need this urgency? No, we start looking for things to do, because the way we've come to cope with the urgency is by getting something done. And then that temporarily calms that urgent feeling. So we don't just relax because everything's done. No, we still have this feeling of urgency. How do I get rid of it? By getting something done. Well, I don't have anything to do. Well, let's make something to do. Well, there's no problems here. Well, I'll create one. I'll make one. I'll make one so that I can get something done and temporarily calm the urgency. And then what happens 10 minutes later? The urgency comes back. Is this sustainable? Is this pleasant? No, this is suffering. This is suffering. From Gagan, how did you deal with panic attacks when it comes out of nowhere? This is a little bit tricky for me to answer in the sense that very, very rarely would I have panic attacks that came out of nowhere. My issue with panic was very circular. I had panic about having panic. So I would start thinking about the sensations and the experience of having a panic attack, and then try very, very hard to make sure none of those sensations arose. And through that hypervigilance and the fear of the thought, that would just start to spin, and panic would start to arise. So it was kind of a catch-22. It was very self-generated, again, causing my own suffering. However, the way of working with that, and I got into this a little more deeply, I think a couple of weeks ago, the way that I ultimately found of working with that was really profoundly successful for me in those early days, was a huge first turning point in my practice, was not fighting the sensations, not fighting to make sure my breathing wasn't getting too quick, not fighting to try to keep my heart rate at something that I considered to be, out of the panic zone, right? If certain sensations or thoughts came up related to panic or that I associated with panic, well, okay, let's notice this. Kind of like bringing attention to this particular body part like we did today. Except in this case, it's something that is drawing our attention. Oh, here's a sensation that I don't have very positive associations with. It's interesting, though, because it's not even the sensations themselves. It's really the perceptions. Because if you think of the sensations of a panic attack, increased heart rate, quickened breathing, maybe some sweating. I mean, you have these same sensations when you might be excited about something. You can have these same sensations when you're exercising, right? It's about our perception and interpretation of the sensations. And that's something that we can notice and then say, okay, here's this sensation. Here's this thought. And here's my initial perception of it. And here's my interpretation of it. Again, like I was saying before, based on our past experience, based on our current desires, based on our current fears. And like I was saying with tension at the beginning of our session, we just notice it and allow it to be here. It's not necessarily going to be comfortable. But that's where we really run into trouble, is when we're trying to stamp out any kind of discomfort, when we're trying to never feel pain. That's how we end up causing suffering. When we're not dealing with pain or discomfort skillfully. So, I was causing myself all kinds of suffering in an attempt to never feel certain sensations. Never feel discomfort. It's how I ultimately became housebound with agoraphobia. I was trying to never feel discomfort. And eventually the only place I felt comfortable was in my apartment. And then not even there. It was very ironic. In an attempt to never feel discomfort again, I ended up not being able to feel comfort. And again, it was the same sort of thing where with panic, if I opened up to the sensations, suddenly there wasn't such a big issue anymore. And the same thing with discomfort. Once I opened up to some discomfort, was willing to experience some discomfort, then I was able to experience comfort again, because I found out that comfort was just what I felt after I experienced discomfort. You can't experience something without its opposite. There's no pleasure without pain. How would we know what it felt like? There's no comfort without discomfort. There's sensations and perceptions and interpretations that are relative to what we were feeling before. So we have to feel each side of these opposing experiences. They're all really just part of the same thing. You can't get rid of one and still have the other. They're just one thing. Yeah, from Kai, that's exactly it. It's not necessarily comfortable, but it's better than escalating the panic. And that's just it. We escalate the panic. I escalated my panic. It felt automatic because I don't want to escalate my panic, right? I feel like this is something happening to me. No, it's something I was doing. So I changed what I was doing. And wow, the experience changed with it. Again, that inquiry and experimentation. This is what we came to see. What's going on? What's coming up? What am I doing with what's coming up? And what's that leading to? And how's that working out? And based on that, do I want to change something? And then, well, what do I want to change? How do I change this? And there's that experimentation. It's very scientific. We're scientists working on ourselves, using our experience to create a better experience. Again, this is karma. This is karma. Uncomfortable things may come up because of how we've dealt with things before. But we can make a change now. The part of karma that is most changeable is our current intention. Our current intention. So when something comes up, what's our intention? And I found that the most skillful intention is sometimes noticing what my intention is. It's very circular. Sometimes we don't even know what our intention is. We're just acting blindly out of habit, out of an intention maybe we had 10 or 15 years ago. Well, even if that was a skillful intention at the time, is it still a skillful intention now? Maybe. Maybe not. Probably want to see that. Probably want to check that out. From Kai, I read about a thought that we are not our feelings, thoughts, or body. We are a place or scene that those happens. It seems to help observing. Yeah. This is something I talk about sometimes in some of the self sessions. We are not any of those things. On my social media sites, I post thoughts for the day and so forth. And one of the ones that I think it was actually yesterday's or 2 days ago, sometime this week, I posted one that said, we are not something that processes happen to. We're the process. We can't be our thoughts, because if we're our thoughts, who's listening to them? Right? And feelings are really thoughts with a felt sensation, right? And if we're not our thoughts, and we're not our bodies either, we kind of can't be. I mean, if we're our bodies, then who am I if someone cuts my arm off? Am I still me? Is part of me gone? If you keep taking parts away, at what point am I no longer me? So, not really our body, not really our thoughts. If our feelings are really thoughts with a felt sense, and we're not really the thoughts or the felt sense, well, we're not really our feeling. What the hell are we? And I do have an answer for this that I've come to for myself, that I arrived at a few years ago, which has worked well for me. And I'm not going to share it here, because it's something that we can each work on and find our own answers. If somebody is truly dying to know, you're welcome to send me a private message here on Insight Timer or reach out to me in other channels. And it's not something that I don't ever share. But particularly in a large group like this, we've got 72, 76 people in here. I like to give people the opportunity, if you haven't before, or if you have before, to revisit, well, what am I? By the way, this is a question the Buddha himself would not answer. There were questions the Buddha would not answer, because they were not pertinent to what he taught. All he taught was how do we alleviate our own suffering. And he used to say that no matter what answer he would have given to a question like, who am I, or do I exist, or what happens after death, or whatever, no matter what answer he gave that would lead to some kind of suffering, what he called a thicket of views. And I'm getting a little deep into some of the Buddha stuff here that we don't really have time to get into here, but this is stuff the Buddha himself wouldn't answer because it was not pertinent to how do we alleviate our own suffering. We don't have to have an answer to that question to end our suffering. So it's not something you need to necessarily follow to a logical conclusion, whatever that is. Which isn't to say you can't spend some time with it, because like I say, I've spent a lot of time with it. But you don't have to. Not to free yourself from suffering. According to the Buddha. That's not coming from me. I have not freed myself from all of my suffering. So I am not speaking from experience. I'm just passing along the Buddha's teaching on that one. Yeah, Ren, I'll close out with this. So you get caught in anxiety when asking that question. And the answer came to me. Being obsessed with the heart, too much logic, my brain. Yeah, this isn't even, the things that you're noticing, it can be enough for now, simply that you're noticing. Because one of the problems we can run into is, like for example, you say you're too much logic, my brain is looking for. And sometimes that in itself can compound on itself, where, the brain notices that there's too much logic going on, and then we try to use logic to stop the logic process. We start running into that sort of thing, which again is like using tension to get rid of tension. Sometimes when I say, we can watch the breathing without trying to control it. But if you find that you're controlling it, you can just notice that, because otherwise you can fall into the trap of trying to control the controlling. I say how this practice is not easy, but it is simple. And sometimes what's not easy is keeping it so simple. And this really points to that, which is sometimes the most skillful thing to do so that we don't fall into those kinds of circular traps is to simply notice the phenomenon as it's happening. Because the phenomena, these things of controlling and the over-logicking and these sorts of things, these are doings. These are doings. These are things we are doing. So stopping them isn't another doing that we do to stop the doing. Stopping them is a not doing. Well, how do we do a not doing? You don't. You can't do a not doing. So how does not doing happen? By sitting and watching the doing over and over and over again. Like I always say, it's like someone hands you a hot potato. You don't think about doing the dropping of the hot potato. You just drop it. It just happens. That's what happens here. We see the processes again and again and again, and when it sinks in at a deep enough level subconsciously, we just let go. You can't do letting go. You have to just allow it to happen. Well, how the hell do we do that? Just keep watching. Just keep watching. And when you see clearly enough times, oh, shit, I'm causing suffering. And it's not going to be a conscious thought like that. This is at the subconscious level. That's why we have to keep watching. We have to wait for it to seep in at that level that we can't control. And then the shifts happen on their own. And what's really funny is sometimes when those shifts happen, we're surprised. We're like, well, how the hell did that happen? Even though we've spent like so much time doing the watching. When the shifts actually do happen, we almost feel like we didn't do anything. Like, well, how did that happen? Kind of funny. It's just an interesting thing I've noticed for myself. Yeah, Chris, Abbott and Costello. Yeah, it's like we all have Abbott and Costello running around in our minds. Or maybe in my case, it might be more the Three Stooges. I'll wrap it up there, folks. We've just hit an hour, and I do have to run. But this has been great. I hope you enjoyed this. Like I say, this is one I've not presented before. And it's just something I've started noticing for myself, the technique that I offered today. I just started noticing, I don't even know how I stumbled across it, but just in the last couple of months. And I was like, oh, let me throw this out there today. Maybe it'll resonate for some other folks. So once again, I am Ron Levine from Mindfulness in Blue Jeans. You can follow me here on Insight Timer. Check out some of my other sessions. Join the Mindfulness in Blue Jeans group if you like. And we will be back here next Tuesday at the same time for the next in our ongoing series of Calming Anxiety by Living Mindfully. Folks, thank you all so much for being with me. I hope you have a great rest of your day and evening. Thanks so much. Cheers, everyone. Take care.